Welcome. Nice to have you with us as we have the Habersham Chamber of Commerce post-legislative forum and wrap-up from the 2021 session. I'm Joel Williams, and we're proud to have with us today Representative Chris Irwin. We also have Senator Bo Hatchett, and we have Representative Victor Anderson. Gentlemen, nice to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Joel.
Now, you can submit questions on Facebook as you're watching live here as well, and I believe we'll have some of those here momentarily. But let's go across the line here, across the board, and just ask about your summation of the 2021 session that just wrapped up. Certainly a lot different than the 2020 session, that's for sure. Some of you are newcomers to that. But Chris, we'll start with you first, if you would.
Great, Joe. First of all, I felt very well structured, very safe, ran very smooth. Our constitutional requirement of going in and setting a state budget was accomplished. We start out with a supplemental budget, and we jumped on that right away, got that done, passed on to the Senate. They got it through, and we agreed quite a bit with the governor and his revenue marks and recommendations. You can imagine we could go in very tense right off the bat with the budget, Joel, and especially in a COVID period. So I think there was a lot of good discussion, teamwork, both parties working together, trying to accomplish our one constitutional goal. So my assessment of what we did and what our mission was from the beginning was to get that done and do it safely. I think all that occurred. Then, of course, we went on to the bills and the other things that you normally do in a session and trying to get accomplished. But I felt very good teamwork, very strong group there.
Senator Bo Hatchett.
Thank you. It was a unique session, obviously, with COVID, and this was my freshman year, but I've been down at the Capitol before, and one of the first things you notice is how quiet it is this past session, because they capped the number of people that were allowed in the Capitol. We all had to get tested every single morning, twice a week for COVID, and they did a really good job working with the North Georgia Health System and Georgia Tech, making sure we were all tested, and I actually caught it while I was down there and got through it, and on the other side. But that was a unique challenge, but we overcame it and were able to pass some good legislation. And just echo what Representative Irwin said earlier, obviously we got the budget out, and we also got some good bills, including an election bill that some people may have heard of that got through and that we're very proud of. And it was a good session, a good session for my first year, and I'm looking forward to getting back down there and doing some more work for the district.
Good, very good. And then we go back to the House side. Victor Anderson, your freshman season as well.
That's correct, and I'm probably the newest of the new. Even Bo here has a little more experience down there than I do. I've visited the Capitol a few times, but never actually been on staff or worked in it. So I had a little different, a little more of a unique perspective from what was going on. The first thing that struck me is the professionalism and the understanding and the pride that the people in the Capitol take in what they're doing, representing the people of their districts, representing the state of Georgia. I didn't expect less, but when you watch the media, you see the outliers a lot of times, what makes news and that sort of thing. So just the structure, the way things were handled, the protocols that were put in place to protect us and more so to protect our families. I was very impressed with that. As Chris said, we very successfully right out of the bat passed an amended budget for the current fiscal year that we're in. That was a very good piece of legislation, and then started working on the budget for next fiscal year, which we'll discuss a little bit later on is a very good indication of where our state is headed and what's going on. So all in all, it was very educational for me, unique for everybody, and I'm looking forward to maybe getting back to what used to be considered normal.
Well, we'll talk a little bit about that, and I want to go back and reflect on what Representative Irwin said. That's true. The only constitutional obligation you have as a legislator is to pass a budget. So let's dive into the budget a little bit, because I think maybe that was overshadowed by some other things that got a lot of national media attention, which we'll get to. How good is this budget, and what does it do for the state of Georgia? And we'll get everybody's opinion on that.
Okay. First of all, let's talk that we went through a suspension for the first time in the history of a session last year, came back in June, if you remember, and finished the last 12 days, Joe, of the session, and set the FY21 budget. So we had worked quite hard on that one. Well, we came back from good decisions in the state and some economic impact that was better than the revenue marks that we had set back for FY21. The supplemental budget that Victor also mentioned there, the amended budget, we were able to add back 60% of what I'll tell you was the 10% cut that we assigned groups like K-12 education, almost $1 billion cut to them. We were able to add 60% back to the current budget. And we did that very quickly in the session, so they were able to react to that during the year. Education, which I think was important. We were able to use that excess money that we were able to see the economy building to add into human services, health and human services, which also was going to impact mental health for us. So I think we started targeting the extra money that we were able to put into the amended budget. So we were very proud of where the state was economically compared to where we thought we would be back in June.
A follow-up just really quick. Was planning last year in the two sessions, because you had you didn't have a double session, you had a split session last year. Good planning got you there, and how rewarding was that, and how nervous were you in the latter stages of COVID, maybe the latter stages of the year going into the new session?
Let me tell you, very good conservative planning. As you know, in the state of Georgia, we have to balance our budget when we set it. So we were very cautious, not having gone through this in any recent history, to look to see what is this impact really going to be. But as we got into it and well into it, we could start making predictors for the state. And that's when you can do an amended budget like we did. Boy, that is a beautiful thing. Yes, the getting to June and right before we started that budget was very well planned and good conservative decisions.
All right, we're talking about the budget here to open up our post-legislative forum. Victor, let's stay with you and in the House right now, then Bo, we'll come back to the Senate. So what they did to set this priority budget, that's a lot of big numbers you're working with, especially first time in.
It is a lot of big numbers. I thought I had some experience working with big numbers as County Commission Chairman in Habersham County, but we're talking about a budget that's 100 times that. And so yes, it's very daunting and overwhelming. But to echo what Chris said, the planning that had gone into our economy and our state budgeting process over the last several years really paid off last year, okay? And in the current year that we're in, we were able to minimize those cuts. Now, one thing to remember is going into last year, pre-COVID, the plans were to go ahead and make, what was it, a 4% cut across the board, I think, in the budget anyway, just because of potential normal economic fluctuations, and we ended up after the virus scenario and the potential shutdowns and that sort of thing. The session before this year, last year's session, ended up settling on about a 10% cut to settle that, and then we were able to restore that back to pretty much with the amended budget back to where the original target was. To me, that shows the resiliency of the business climate, the resiliency of the economy of Georgia, and the leadership that we've had over the last years.
Bo Hatchett, from the Senate viewpoint of that.
Yeah, I just echo what they both said about the numbers, and I just want to, bring up another challenge that we faced in the Senate. We had a chairman of Appropriations whose name was Jack Hill, who was a titan in the Senate for years, and he passed away. And we had a new chairman of Appropriations. His name's Blake Tillery, down in South Georgia. And so, at one of the most crucial times in our state's financial history, we had a brand new chairman of Appropriations. And I think because of, I'll go ahead and give the Chamber of Commerce some credit, especially in Habersham. We were able to keep our small businesses open. We had, groups of people that got around and, encouraging people to get takeout food. You don't understand how big of an impact that had, because we set ourselves apart from just about every other state in the country. We were the first ones to open. We were focused on saving lives, but also saving livelihoods. And because we remained open and because we continued to stimulate our economy, we were in a position to where we got to put 60% back in the budget. And I want to thank Mary Beth for the good job she did here in Habersham and other chambers across the state, because I think having that leadership on a grassroots level really made a big difference down the stretch and allowed us to pass the budget that we did. That I'm very proud of the budget we passed, and I think it's very good for the state.
All right, let me ask you this too, Bo. We'll start with you, then go back to the House side. Do you feel like that Georgia actually was a leader? I know Florida gets a lot of attention for opening up, but I thought Georgia was there in step, or maybe a little ahead of Florida earlier on. And is some of that just because of the post, well, shall we say, runoff elections and things along those lines from the way the media is looking at Georgia right now?
I do. I think we were, I mean, my recollection, we were the last to close and the first to open back up. And I think it was, you know, sometimes it's hard being the first person to jump out there, but I think looking back in several years, we were going to see how big of an impact that had on a positive impact that had on our economy, and I think we definitely were the leaders in the country.
Victor Anderson, your thoughts on that?
And I agree with what Bo said. Once the and Chris would know more about this because he was actually involved with this. Again, it was prior to us. Once the virus was identified and the potential impact on our state and nation was identified, the legislature granted our governor special powers to be able to make decisions and do things that normally would require legislatural approval, but he could do them for a certain period of time regarding the COVID crisis. And all I can say is this, that the decisions that were made, the timeliness and the manner that they were made in really are the reason that we're able to come out of that situation with the economy the way that it is.
And Chris, we saved you last for this because you had the experience last year, 2020 into 2021, and your thoughts on Georgia opening.
First thought, Joel, is Representative Anderson's right. There was a series of good decisions made, and they are continuing. It starts with good communication. I think our entire government body did a good job, and this is all the way to our city councilmen and women and what they did in the local communities that helped to suppress this, and the communication just continued, and then the decisions rolled on top of that. Opening early was a targeted, specifically to look at the data, pay attention to that, to specifically make an effort at trying to suppress the spread of this, and I think that's continuing to happen. I'm sure in a little while we'll talk about the vaccination numbers and those type of things, but all of that communication from the top all the way down has made a difference for this state.
Let me get your take on this, because you can go into some cities, the city of Atlanta, for example, and it's as if they have ignored opening. I mean, it's amazing to me how many businesses are still closed, the number of people that can or can't get into a building, even though the state has lifted these sanctions. Any thoughts along those lines? And in trying to enforce or to persuade city leaders like the mayor of Atlanta to open up and get back to business as usual?
Well, Joel, this is my philosophy, and having come from the education world, I believe in local control. You know, everybody's situation is going to be a little bit different. I would hope that we could elect officials that would make best decisions for their area. So we just need to make sure that those areas that are doing that, they have the data, they understand the impact it's having on their community. But I'm a strong believer in local control. Let's go to those leaders, let's hear their decisions, and then let's help them through their decision making.
Victor, any thoughts on that?
I agree with what Chris said, and then that's the first thing that popped into my mind is, like just for example, the city of Cornelia, Clarksville here in Habersham County, their councils, their mayors, the leadership there, the businesses there understand the people. They understand their customers, they understand their constituents, and they can make those decisions. Now, is it inconvenient? Yes. Is it not? Is it nice to come here and go to a restaurant without having to wear a mask to get to your table? Yes, but that, you know, we have to be understanding and be sensitive to the needs and the desires in those communities too.
Bo Hatchett.
You know, I don't think I can add any more from what they were saying, but what I do want to add is, you know, one of the things that I've come across in talking to business owners here and across my district is, you know, a lot of them want to open and they're trying to open and stay open, but they don't have the workforce. And a lot of that has to do with, and I hate to say it, but some people are taking advantage of the unemployment checks that they can collect, and they can sit at home and make money instead of going to work. And I'd love to work on incentivizing people to get back out to work and maybe put some more restrictions on those unemployment checks from coming in, because I know it was needed during the pandemic, but at this point I think it's being abused a little bit.
You are watching the Habersham Chamber of Commerce Post-Legislative Forum here for the 2021 session. And we have with us today Victor Anderson, Chris Irwin, and Bo Hatchett. All right, so let's go back to the budget just a little bit. Income tax. It's almost like this income tax, a tax cut actually, kind of got overshadowed. I got to tell you, I love a tax cut. I mean, any way, form, or fashion. So, Victor, you're smiling about that. Your take on that?
Well, I'm smiling because we actually had a conversation about that last night. We cheated. Okay, we kind of got together last night and compared our notes. But no, seriously, there was a income tax cut passed this year, and while it is modest, it increases the deduction for individuals and families in the state of Georgia. And it can provide, $100, $150 per person, I think is what the number I was hearing across the state, which is modest. But Georgia, compared to most other states who do charge income tax, we're on the bottom end of that spectrum. And, it's a fine line to balance. I know there has been discussion in the past about what if we go to no income tax and that sort of thing, but that's got to be made up somewhere. Ultimately, you've got a hole and it's got to be filled. So I felt very, very good about the tax cut that we passed this year, and the way that is incorporated in with our budget, because our economy is so strong. If we can just get the workforce to help support the economy, then we look forward to doing that more in the future.
Chris, back to the House side.
I'll just reiterate what Representative Anderson said, that we need to continue to look at how we tax for the government that we run. And this was one option to pay attention to that. And I appreciate that out of the legislature and the state of Georgia.
Bo, from the Senate viewpoint?
Yeah, I mean, very similar viewpoint. Obviously, it's something we were proud of as a state. I think it shows, I don't know the numbers, but I'm assuming we may be one of the few states in the country that was able to do an actual tax cut this year. And, I think that goes back to just fiscally conservative leadership at the outset of this pandemic. I remember when I was running and when we had debates, a lot of the projections were that our rainy day fund would be depleted by this time, and we didn't have to touch it. And so that allows us to continue to have our AAA bond rating. It puts our state in a great position to where we can make these cuts, and I hope we can continue this moving forward so that we can be a leader, at least financially, for the country and continue to provide more tax cuts for the people.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I believe numbers out last week shows tax revenue pretty close to where we were. They're up, are they not?
That's
Is that right,
correct.
Chris?
That's
All right.
correct. And unemployment's down, was announced this morning.
That's a good point, too.
4.5%, I think, or less than 4.
We continue on with some other things here, and we can be all over the board here, and we'll take your Facebook questions as well. But I want to go to one here that got a lot of public attention and see what you think of that. That's the citizens arrest reform. That was a big deal for the governor, I know, and I think it was a big deal for the legislature as a whole. But let's start in the Senate side this go around.
Yeah, this is a bill that obviously it was a governor's bill and or one of his initiatives. And one thing that it did was the citizens arrest law was put in place back after the Civil War or just prior to it, where people could arrest slaves and detain them for 72 hours. What this does is kind of does away with that. Since that law was enacted 150 years ago, some odd years ago, there had been a lot of changes through the court system, and what this bill just did was codify those changes. And you can still, this is still stand your ground. It has nothing to do with that. It has nothing to do with Second Amendment. Really, what it does is it says you got to call the police. You can stop somebody, but you got to call the police. You can't just lock them in your basement and keep them in there for 72 hours and do what you want with them, which I can get on board with. I think that's appropriate. But it was a measure that needed to happen, and I think it was it passed almost unanimously in both the House and the Senate, and it was just time to update the law. But citizens' rights in the state of Georgia, as far as stand your ground and anything like that, were not dissolved in any way, shape, or form.
Representative Irwin, anything on that?
I ditto exactly what Senator's saying here, that it was needed to be looked at, addressed, and updated, and it had been a long time since that happened.
Representative Anderson.
Agree, and this particular bill generated a lot of discussion, a lot of debate, both on the chamber floors, but also amongst the caucuses and in just even impromptu meetings and that sort of thing. And the biggest discussion points were not how do we do this, how do we do that. It was how does this affect this scenario? How does this affect that scenario? And as Bo said, it does nothing to detract from Second Amendment rights. It does nothing to detract from stand your ground and being able to defend yourself, your home, and your property. It has carve-out provisions to allow police officers, post-certified employees who technically are on, whether they're on duty or not, they're considered by law on duty 24/7, and they are protected in this. It also protects the shopkeeper provisions to allow you to prevent people from shoplifting and stealing from your businesses, that sort of thing. So it takes the critical components that are in the law, many of them not even, people just assume they're in this section, but they're not, they're in related sections, and leaves all of that and just takes the things that are just outdated out that shouldn't be doing anyway.
All right, and each of you mentioned police protection, police in your summation of that. So let's go to the Prevention of Police Defunding bill. I think that was House Bill 285. Chris, let's start with you and let's go around, because I would think all of us in this room support police. This is certainly a political maneuver by some cities and some constituents, maybe some city leaders, Athens, for example. But the legislature was quick in preventing police departments from being defunded, which would leave us as citizens very vulnerable.
Exactly, and remember that most of us, or all of us, visit other cities and other areas, and we still want to be protected.
Good point. We
still want to have the security that it is safe to go there. So I look at that there, Joel, is that we're making some common sense decisions for our state there for the protection of our citizens.
And we'll stay in the House side. Victor, your thoughts on that?
Okay, and you had mentioned a couple of cities that were, if you could say, discussions were being made. No decisions were actually made in those cities, yeah. But discussions were made in Athens, Clarke County, and the city of Atlanta about possibly taking a significant, potentially up to 50% of their police department budget, redirecting it to different departments or a different avenue, let's put it that way. And this concerned a lot of people. Just to kind of get into a real basic mechanics of this bill, what it does is it says that a city or county government cannot decrease the budget for their police department by more than 5% per year. Now, there are provisions in there that if you have situations that come up to where the economy is projected to have a dip that exceeds 5%, there's adjustments for that. There's also adjustments for one-time high-cost capital expenditures like buying a new fleet of cars, that sort of thing, that can kind of gives you a little leeway in there. But as you said, this was a bill designed to prevent a potentially damaging and potentially deadly movement that has been promoted across the country.
And to your point about the city of Athens, I believe from that area there was leadership to make sure this was passed, and I believe maybe it introduced the bill.
Well, Representative Gaines, which is one of the two representatives that represent Athens, Clarke County, was the champion of this bill, and it was one that I would say was probably one of his primary concerns to make sure that this got pushed through.
And from the Senate viewpoint, Bud?
Yeah, from the Senate viewpoint, I was glad this bill came up. Unfortunately, the culture that we live in right now and the mainstream media that you see is driven by people with an agenda. And the agenda right now, for whatever reason, is anti-police, and it's just wrong. Most of the stories, if you see a police officer in the news, usually it's something bad. And every day in this county and surrounding counties, they're putting their lives on the line, and they're doing things every single day to stop terrible things from happening that don't make the news. And what we had to do was, because of this agenda that some people have, they're trying to defund the police. And this is something that we can make sure that the people that are on the front lines, that are putting their lives on the line for us, they don't lose their funding. They, I would hate for them to not be able to afford bulletproof vests or afford to defend themselves. And I'm glad this bill passed, and it's something that was definitely needed.
I don't think we can have a legislative session in Georgia without having school vouchers come up. So we're going to stay in the Senate right now because Senate Bill 47 passed, school vouchers. Walk us through that a little bit, Bo.
Yeah, so we actually had a conversation about this last night, and Chris is my go-to education guy. And we talk a lot, and if it's all right, I'd like to defer to him to explain that bill a little bit better, just because him and I spoke throughout the session as well.
Well, Joe, let's start back. We have a voucher bill on the books already that was passed over 10 years ago, and it's a special needs voucher bill for students, and approximately 5,200 students this year are using that voucher bill. Another one came through that added military, it added foster children in the bill. As well as special needs students. We could dig pretty deep into it and talk about 504. That's more of an educational term on needs of students, but that was part of the bill also. But we did add a voucher bill in education for children to look at of need. Now, they would need one of the modalities in education that are listed under special needs, and dyslexia would be one of those. ADHD would be another one of those, that if you qualify under a medical need for that, you could use these vouchers and then take that voucher out into the private sector and get your educational needs met.
And because of your history, Chris, let me ask you this, because the House failed to consider House Bill 60, I believe it was.
Correct.
And in that bill, that would have created a new educational savings account program to provide vouchers for private schools and homeschooling. That comes up quite often, does it not?
does.
And do you see that coming back again? Is that something that's going to be rehashed in the future as well?
Joe, I do think it'll be discussed. The discussion around that mostly was around the accountability end, that if you send that tax dollar into the public or private world, how do you hold them accountable for using that tax dollar? And the bill was not addressing that in a lot of the discussions we were hearing. And so, yes, I do think you'd see it come back, and I think you'd see that being discussed and see if accountability could be attained.
And Victor, your thoughts on that before we go to another topic?
Well, I'm like Bo. Okay, when it comes to educational issues, my first phone call is to Chris. But to what Chris said, and particularly with the House Bill 60, that was one that generated a lot of discussion, and it was significantly different from the one that did pass. But will it come back? First of all, remember that we're in the first year of a 2-year biennial session, so anything that did not pass this year is still kind of hanging around out there and could potentially come up next year without having to be reintroduced. So a lot of these things that did not show up this year are still in the process.
Well, that's a very good point, Victor. And on that point, I do want to ask Chris. I'm going to go to him on this
Go
one
ahead.
because it really doesn't apply to you two. But you worked a split session last year. Are there advantages to the split session, or do you prefer the 40 days straight, one and done?
Joel, first thought is one and done, 40 days straight rather than a split session. We did get the advantage of seeing the impact of COVID and what was occurring, but all the other discussions need to have that continued conversation going, the momentum of carrying it and getting it through rather than stalling it out. So yes, my answer to you would be, let's do the one and done.
I'm seeing heads nod in agreement on that. All right, very good. So kind of dovetailing on the voucher program, homeschool athletes pass. That was Senate Bill 42, Bo.
Yeah, and that's something that's been brought up for several years now. I think it was at first maybe there was a lot of pushback as it's been implemented in other states and as school districts, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but this is kind of that's a catch-up bill, and I think it was a good measure to pass. And I'll say, Representative Anderson and I are very lucky because I'll go ahead and say it. Representative Irwin is one of the most well-versed people in that Capitol as far as education issues go, and we're very lucky to have him and can talk to him when these bills come up, and I just appreciate that insight, and also appreciate that we're able to work together, which is somewhat unique, as they know. Sometimes, and you'll have split delegations where you have a Democratic senator, Republican representatives, or vice versa. But we've been able to work as a team, and I think it's really done a good service to the district.
Joel, can I add to that one too? Excuse me, Senator.
Yeah, absolutely.
On this. These students pay taxes. Homeschool students still pay taxes. They are required in the bill to go back and take one course at the school in a related field of the extracurricular activity they want to be in. So as band, then band class would then be your course that you most likely should take. But it's just opening up the opportunity for public education and homeschool to merge some. And so I was for it. I voted for it, and look forward to seeing that go well. Some of my decisions, Joe, were based on talking to Georgia High School Association, which governs that activity of extracurricular force, and they were for the bill, and they understood it. And then they had also done their homework and looked around the country at what the rest of the country was doing. And we were late getting off the dock on that one, so I'm glad that we passed that bill.
And to your point earlier from Senator Hatchett and Representative Anderson, for Representative Irwin, if you're not familiar, is a former educator, and so a lot of experience in that. Anything you want to add to that, Victor?
Really nothing I can add to it. I just know that that this is a good bill.
All right, so we're all over the place here this morning, so nothing in kind of a categorized procession here, but House Bill 112, that was a COVID-19 lawsuit shield. So Chris, let's start with you this time. What does that really do?
It continues to support our small business owner out there, and we needed to do that. Concerned about tying up our courts with COVID. There were a number of things in there that really helped us out, but that bill to me was protecting our small business owners and in our community. There are some requirements with the bill too, and but was proud to see that one came out. And if you remember, Joel and Representative Anderson, that one came out quick, and we discussed it very early in the session, which I thought was important too. Again, getting back to what you asked at the beginning, the timing of our session, we worked very hard in understanding what our priorities were to try to get done and work on.
And that's a good point. And I didn't mean to just jump in without direction here, but that we came into this session understanding, again, our number one constitutional requirement, but we also understood that our state was in the middle of the first modern worldwide pandemic, the potential impact on the economy and people's lives in general. So there were certain key measures. This was one of the first bills that we actually brought to the floor for debate and passed. And basically, as Chris said, what it does is it just extends what had already been put in place with some improvements after having 8-9 months of experience with the previous bill from last session. And so yeah, no, this was a protect our economy bill.
Senator Bill Hatchett, any thoughts from the Senate chamber?
Yeah, the bill was originally introduced to once again encourage businesses to open back up, and I think this just shows yet again, why we're the number one state in the nation to do business. Is we didn't want a small business owner to be afraid to open up and be opened up to some type of lawsuit if somebody catches COVID in their store. And what this does is it just adds, the original expiration I believe was June 31st of this year. It's going to add another year to that protection and continue to allow people to open up and not worry about a COVID-19 lawsuit.
We're glad to have you with us today with our Habersham Chamber of Commerce Post-Legislative Forum for 2021. And again, thanks to Kinetic by Windstream and their facilities and for producing this today. All right, so you would think this is the biggest issue, and it is a huge issue, there's no doubt about that, but the national media has really spotlighted on the reform of Georgia voting laws. The governor and Republicans have been very quick to say, easier to vote, harder to cheat. But you would think the narrative has certainly been tried to be turned around in a national media spotlight. Bo, you've alluded to this earlier, so we're going to start from the Senate side. And if you had a group of naysayers here about that, what would you tell them to explain what's in that, I believe, a 92-page bill that we understand a lot of people didn't read to begin with. So.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's been a hot topic for sure. And you know, I had the honor of serving on an ethics committee which vetted these bills, and we heard, I mean, hours of testimony from, you know, different groups. And you know, what this bill does is, you know, we looked at some of the loopholes. We looked at some issues that with voter security, with the way they count votes, and you know, 90% of the vote is about how you're supposed to count. You know, you have to, you know, and how you issue absentee ballots and things of those nature. And what the mainstream media is doing is they're completely miscategorizing the bill, and they're throwing you know, words like Jim Crow around. And you know, what this does is, we didn't invent any new law here in Georgia. We looked at other states. We saw, you know, which states have secure elections. What can we borrow from them to help our system and help regain confidence in a system that was shaken? Because, you know, one of the biggest things that I heard was, you know, people were afraid to vote. They didn't think their vote would count. They were afraid there was fraud. And this system now, especially with, you know, requiring an ID number, social security number, or you know, date of birth, some of those combinations to request an absentee ballot, is a big measure, I think, that will help secure our elections further. You know, one of the big, you know, hot button issues is passing out water in line. You know, that's been a rule for a long time. It's a rule across the country. It's a rule in New York. What you can't do is, you know, approach a voter line and pass something of value and expect them to vote for your candidate in return. And so what we did was, you know, you can pass out water outside of 150 feet. If you want to donate water to the precinct, you can, and they can set up a table where people can go get their own water, but you can't just walk in line and pander for votes and pass out water. And, you know, I think that's another thing that was completely mischaracterized in the mainstream media. But, you know, I would have never voted for a bill that would suppress voters. And this bill right now is going to make it easier to vote for people across the state, and it's going to make it harder to cheat. And hopefully in the future, people will have more confidence or regain their confidence in the voting system, because it's needed, and hopefully this is a step in the right direction.
Victor Anderson.
To kind of follow up on what Bo was saying about, you know, water and passing out things of value has been in the code sections for years and years and years. Kind of the antithesis of that is drop boxes. That's a big discussion. Drop boxes did not exist in Georgia. Voter ballot drop boxes are not in our code. We're not, and they did not exist and were not utilized prior to COVID. They were authorized and allowed during COVID under those special powers and provisions. And so people talk about, oh, they're doing away with this, or they're decreasing the number of drop boxes. Most counties in Georgia didn't utilize that. So what this bill has done is it's codified things that we've recognized over the last year, that, hey, these things make sense, but these can be gained. So we've kind of separated those two, and we've put in place provisions that provide not only allow but require every county in the state to have a drop box under certain parameters and provisions, but at the same time set it up so that, as Bo said, it's harder to cheat. Every legal voter in the state of Georgia should have an easier time to vote under this bill. Every person who does not want to follow the rules will have a harder time not following the rules.
And if I could piggyback off of that, one thing that people fail to mention, and that's in that bill, is right now, if your wait times in your precinct were longer than an hour in the previous election, then you have to open up more precincts or add voting machines to where that time will be decreased. And that's a big move for the state of Georgia, because once again, we want to encourage people to go vote. We don't want somebody standing in line for 3 or 4 hours to vote. And so that was another measure that I think makes it easier to vote and yet harder to cheat.
Yeah.
And Chris, we'll go to you as the dean of this legislative delegation, so to speak, and certainly some of these outcries have started post-2018 gubernatorial election about, hey, is this on the up and up? Can we watch this? Do we have the protections for this? Because this is not something new from 2020 presidential election. This has been going on for a few years in Georgia.
Yes, and Joe, I guess just let me start with election integrity is paramount. we should not go to the polls thinking my vote isn't going to count. So we need to pass laws that absolutely ensures that our voters can go there and feel that their votes count. And also, we heard Senator Hatchett say here, which is exactly right, this is a very vetted law, very well thought out, very well discussed in the well of the House, and from what I hear, in the well of the Senate. So I think all of what has been said is true, and I fully support this bill and it moving forward. And honestly, I expected this type of attention to a bill like this in the setting we're in, and I think that's good. I think it's good to have discussion about election integrity, and let's go in and make sure that I vote and then make sure that my vote counts, and that should be for everybody.
All right, we have this from Charlie, who has sent this to us here this morning. Since 2020 was a census year, we have new population numbers in Georgia. So when will there be reapportionment? I guess we'll just kind of head toward that and the task that is ahead for that. So, Chris, we'll start with you first.
Interesting to see the census come out at this time. What we are told by the federal government now that we ought to receive that at the end of September. They haven't said the exact date, but end of September. What we are positioning for, I believe, as two chambers and two bodies there in Atlanta would be sometime in November to try to get that task done. That'll be another good discussion amongst the team down there, not the two parties, the whole team together to try to get this right for the state of Georgia. And I'm looking forward to that part. I'm also looking forward to getting back down to Atlanta so that we can continue to build what I'll tell you, Joe, and I'd like to talk about later a little bit, is being a team. But, being a state of Georgia, not being a divided group here, are as divided as we are.
Let's go back to Victor on the House side of that before we get to the Senate then.
What Chris said is spot on as far as the information we're receiving as far as redistricting. That time frame is what we're looking at. It's something that none of us have been a part of. It's kind of unusual, not only for it to be our first year in session for Bo and I, but also to get to participate in this. And I do know that there's discussions already going on. The official census data won't be available till September sometime, but they are starting to send out very, very broad preliminary numbers, like some total numbers I think are due sometime next month, I think, for the state, but not broken down by census blocks and that sort of thing. So there's a committee, just like with the election integrity. The committee on the House side, we had a special committee that looked at election integrity that was put in place 4 months before this bill even came to the House floor. That bill took a lot of time to develop. We have a committee that is in both chambers, have committees that are looking at redistricting issues, things that can be discussed. Where are there problems now? Where are there boundaries that are confusing, like we have some here in our Northeast Georgia, that sort of thing. Looking at those matters now so that once we get those numbers, we'll be that much farther ahead and hopefully be ready to start plugging in census blocks and figuring out what goes where.
Senator Hatchett.
Yep, I think they covered that pretty good. I don't know if I can add a lot, but just for the people back at home, redistricting basically, our districts are either going to grow or shrink depending upon the population size. And I think with the growth that we've seen in Northeast Georgia, most of ours will probably get smaller geographically.
All right, there is a follow-up that is for the Senate side for you. So, and this kind of deals on politics a little bit. So we'll see where you go with this one, because there is speculation, and I mean from the Chief of Staff of Lieutenant Governor Duncan, that he may not run again. And so the question being, would the Senate pro tem be a legitimate candidate if that office is available? And what do you think that means for the Senate as a whole, should those political rumors play out?
Yeah, so I haven't, other than hearsay and rumors around that Lieutenant Governor wasn't running again, I haven't heard it from him or his office. But if he does decide not to run, yes, the current pro tem Butch Miller would be a very qualified candidate to run.
All right, I want to go, Chris has brought and alluded to this, so let's get to this, because I got a question here for you. How split are Republicans and Democrats in the legislature? Starting with the House, we'll go to the House members first and then to the Senate. Since you brought that up a little bit and talking about team, Chris, take that and run with it.
Absolutely. What I can tell you, what I remember in the last biennial was that there's obviously a divide, but the divide was not that great. And currently there is a big divide because there are some issues such as election integrity that have come up that have separated us apart. But what I do want to point out is a lot of times those big challenges such as World War II pull a country together, pull people together. COVID can do that for us through this discussion to pull us closer together so that we can champion being a state and a country. And so I'll tell you, Joel, I have seen us this session come apart, but I see us turning and making a move. And that's why I mentioned about November, getting back down in there. When you're in the heat of the battle, it's hard to make an assessment. But when you get out and away from the battle and start viewing the battle from the past or from a distance, it's easier to say how far apart or how close you are. So November will give us that time to have that discussion and try to pull the two together as one team.
And hanging out with your own constituents in your own district. A lot of people think Congress should do that more than be in Washington. They might have a better feel for how the country it really feels out there and what the real numbers are.
And let me tell you, you'll see the smiles on the legislators' faces when they get out of Atlanta and go in with their constituents and start feeling good. Remember, we have constituents on both sides here, and we can pull them back together with us too and get closer to them when we're with them.
All right, let's stay in the House and we'll go to the Senate. Victor Anderson.
Okay, real quickly, understanding because of protocols, the way the House functioned this year is kind of interesting and throws a little different perspective depending on where you were on what Chris is saying here and the question that you're asking. Chris and a lot of the tenured members of the House had their assigned seats in the House chamber on the floor where if you see a photograph of the House, that's where you see people sitting and the business being conducted. Because of distancing requirements related to COVID and the protocols related to that, only about, little less than half of the House members actually were sitting in those seats.
On the floor.
On the floor. The rest of us, and I said us, we're split up either between the balcony level, which is generally where the public can come and view activities going on within the House and the Senate at the time, or, as in my case, down the hall in what's called Room 341, which is the Appropriations and Rules meeting room, which is a large room. Now, we weren't necessarily exiled, because every one of us had a microphone next to us and we had a big screen and there were cameras everywhere. So we were participating in discussions and asking questions and debate on the House floor, just doing it pseudo remotely. Now, I say all that to come back to this point, talking about the divide. There is a divide. Of course, me being new, it's hard for me to know, other than talking with people who have been there before, how things, the good old days, how things used to be and that sort of thing. But I can tell you the group in 341, we were split up about 50, maybe 60-40 Republicans and Democrats. And we had, because we were pseudo-remotely, sometimes we forgot that there's a big screen over it and Chris could see what we were doing, so we had to kind of be careful make sure we were following rules when we were in there and that sort of thing. But we had a lot of discussion with our colleagues, the people sitting next to us that may not be of the same political party we were. And while, yes, there are a lot of votes that are party line votes, you can pick those out fairly easily. Look, anything that's 90-something to 60 or 70-something is a party line vote. But at the end of the day, in the discussions, even if we didn't vote the same way, we had the same concerns. We had the same intent, and I think other than the fact that we were separated from the well of the floor, basically, that probably helped a lot of us, especially, and there were a lot of new guys and ladies in that room, and it kind of helped us gel some relationships that hopefully once everything is back together, we can all continue working on.
I'm glad you brought that up about the separation, because I didn't know that. Is that because you were a underclassman, so to speak, because you're a freshman?
Actually, not really, because we actually had some committee chairmen and that sort of thing. So I don't really know what the process was, but it was unique.
Did you get to sit at your desk at all?
I don't even know if I have a desk.
Okay, all right. So,
I mean, I'm sure I will.
haven't had that
When we get
opportunity
back
yet.
in session, I will have an assigned desk. My assigned desk this time was in 341.
I didn't know if you just had one and you could walk by and look and go, well, maybe next year or something like that. Bo, from the Senate side on that as well.
Yeah, there are obviously some issues that we're always going to be divided on. As a Republican, it's, we like less government, lower taxes, pro-Second Amendment, pro-life. Those things are things that are going to divide us from our Democratic colleagues in the Senate. But a majority of the bills, if you look, that we pass are, so it's not rare to get a unanimous vote in the Georgia Senate right now. I think it's a rarity when you get to the national level because, they're divided on everything. And luckily that hasn't come down to Georgia yet. We're still able to work across the aisle and get some good legislation through for, our constituents. We did a taxpayer fairness bill that I was able to sponsor that passed unanimously, some adoption reform, foster care reform that was able to pass unanimously. So yeah, there are issues that we're divided on, but it's not as bad as people think, and we are still able to work across the aisle to get positive legislation through.
And on that note, let's talk about something from the Senate as well. Senate Bill 33 and Senate Bill 34, targeting human trafficking. It's huge for the governor, but I would think any governor with a D or an R or an I by his or her name would think this is huge. It's a blight on the state for sure. It's a blight on the human race. So progress made. I know this has been something in the last 2 years that progress has been made on your assessment of that through those two bills.
Yeah, this is a very serious issue that a lot of people don't realize. Atlanta is one of the world's hubs for human and sex trafficking, and that's a shame that that's in our backyard. And what this bill does, and I applaud the governor and I applaud the First Lady for making this one of their big initiatives, is we are trying to crack down on not only the human traffickers but those who help them. If you're a hotel that gets kickbacks by keeping your mouth shut, when there's a human trafficking ring, there's a civil remedy for that. And there are numerous measures that were put in both of those bills that hopefully will have a positive impact in getting the number of people trafficked down to zero. Just piggybacking off of that, going back to the foster care reform that we put in, a huge number of people who are victims of human trafficking are people who were in the foster care system that were never adopted out. And I was able to work with the governor's office to pass bills that make it easier and make it more efficient to adopt people out and help these families that bring children in their home. It's there's not a single solution that we have that can stop human trafficking completely, but these bills and the things that we were able to accomplish this year, and I say these were unanimous votes, are going to make a huge impact, and hopefully we can protect future Georgians down the line with these measures.
From the House viewpoint of that, Representative Irwin?
We figured out, I think, a couple of years ago that communicating about this, knowing it's a problem, and not let it be hidden in our society out there was critical. And I think you're going to see legislation continue to flow out there to target these individuals that are doing this, that are making this available and inside our society. And so let's just keep attacking this one. I saw the negative impacts as a school leader on the children that were impacted by this, and it's an absolute terrible thing. I am so proud, as Senator Hatchett said, that our First Lady has taken this on as her #1 initiative, and our governor is 100% backing this. That's what it's going to take to eradicate this out of the state of Georgia. But I see that happening for what I just told you. We realize it's a problem, and that legislation is going to keep rolling out.
And Representative Victor Anderson.
I really don't have anything more I can add. These guys have said it properly, and it is a major concern.
A comment that came across for all three of you. Thankful for your thoughtful representation through a tough year. And here's another one that said for the hard work for representing at the General Assembly. So a couple of shout outs to you three guys for being here today. There's another one that did not pass. This is the House Bill 290. It's patient visitation fail. Chris, let's start with you on this, because there are people that feel like going through COVID that not being able to visit loved ones in a nursing home or a hospital really added to a mental state or despair, or COVID itself. You have thoughts on this?
I had constituents. I had talked quite a bit about this. We did a lot of debate in the well, about where are the rights for that. Where's our opportunity? And we heard it on other sides, which would be the health end for the community and the safety of the hospital itself. So we had to balance with this legislation those two items there. Are we going to continue to spread this by allowing this? And then where is the human end of this that has to happen? And I think, again, the bills that we heard in the House and what we were working on were striking a good balance between the two by opening it up for a period in time. And having some regulations around it, but allowing them in there to make the decisions and to help out. We also heard in the well, I want to point out from a doctor, a representative that is a doctor, about the difference in a patient when a family member comes inside and they're gravely ill, and the impact that has. And that struck me strong, that there's some health end also to a family member standing next to a gravely ill person and communicating. So that will and continue to weigh my decision on votings like this.
So how did this not pass? What was not there to pass this, given that plea versus the other plea, and where were you on the vote?
I was on the side of the family member, I would say. I heard the data from the medical society, but we held the data in there that, in my mind, that period in time we could let those people in if we take the precautions that we need to with those people that come in to see that patient or to see their family member. So that was the side I was on. Now where it stopped, I saw the momentum. I thought it was going to go through, Joel, and so I can't tell you what point. Maybe these other two can tell you exactly what struck it down. It could have been the language in the bill.
Did the bill get out of committee to a vote on the House, on the floor of the House?
It did.
Okay.
It did. In the House, we did have debate on it. So
Victor, your thoughts on that?
As Chris said, I was fully in support of the bill from day one. Okay, and that is to allow very gauged and controlled visitation. I'll say this: while the bill did not make it through the entire process, I think if you look at what's going on right now, the debate and discussion around the bill and the topic has created a positive effect. Okay, first of all, we are beginning to release restrictions from the state level and even from local levels regarding any restriction around COVID, and that's spilling over into the medical community too. The bill originally, there were some conflicts between the way it was originally written and the acronym is escaping me, but the federal guidelines that hospitals and nursing homes operate under. There was some discrepancies there. All of that got worked out through to the final version that was passed in the House. But even though this bill did not pass, we're beginning to see local hospitals, we're beginning to see nursing homes and that sort of thing to provide access under certain circumstances that would actually be very much in the spirit of the bill that was passed out of the House. So we're starting to see some impact.
And the late Senator Paul Coverdale, U.S. Senator, always said, before you pass a law, hold on. When somebody says there ought to be a law, he says, wait on that. So sometimes maybe things can move without having to have a law in the books, and maybe that's a positive thing. So it didn't make it to the Senate, but Bo had it. I guess it did not make it to the Senate out of the House to the Senate for debate.
It did make it out of the House to the Senate, but I think it's in Senate
tabled,
committee.
or it still is in.
Okay.
It may be tabled.
But it was a bill that's I had my grandmother in December caught COVID, went to the hospital, and my family wasn't able to visit her, and she ended up, passing away in December. So it's a very personal issue. It's a very emotional bill. But there's also the side of it from a medical provider where, there are certain types of treatment, whether it be, mental health, drug rehab, things of that nature, where it may not be the best. It may not be best for the patient to allow them to see a certain family member for an hour a day. So there's a delicate balance that needed to be struck, and I hope we're going to be able to find that balance, because it is very emotionally taxing as a family member that wants to see someone in the hospital, especially when they're at the end of their life and you're not able to see it. So it's very important that we can get something to address that issue through.
And Chris, I know 2 years ago you never thought you'd have a bill like that even coming forward. So nothing that you were looking at, or a lot of legislators were looking at prior to this session. Bo, we have a question for you from one of our viewers here on Kinetic by Windstream. If you were given the chance to vote to repeal the Delta fuel tax exemption, would you do it? And I'm sure this is dovetailing out of Delta and Major League Baseball and the voting law.
I was very disappointed with their stance on our election bill. They were wrong about it completely. They didn't read the bill. I don't know whether they were pandering to a certain group, a certain media outlet, but if you're going to be a business in the state of Georgia and you're going to benefit from our tax laws and benefit from our business community, then you can't throw the legislature that created that business community under the bus. And so if they continue to hold that position and accuse us of passing a voter suppression bill, then I would before that. But you got to realize Delta is, I think, the largest employer in the state of Georgia, and so there's a balance there too. I mean, they have Republicans working for them too, and I'd hate to take jobs away from the Republicans or just take jobs away from Georgians in general because of something their CEO did. I was very disappointed, and hopefully in this off season we can sit at the table with the Delta CEO and see if we can get some get them to retract that statement and actually read the bill.
I'm going to give it to the House guys as well. So, Victor, we'll start with you, too.
Okay, well, the answer is pretty obvious. We passed it. It got held up in between in some discussions and consideration, I'm sure. But as Bo said, now understand that the jet fuel tax credits that Delta gets $30 to $40 million a year in benefit out of have been. The credit has been applied, it's been retracted, it's been kind of footballed around several times over the years. So it's not like this is something that's new. And we're not necessarily asking, I say we, but I say myself because I voted to accept the amendment that would have retracted the credit. So I voted for it. We're not saying we want you to support our bill. We're saying we want you to operate your business and conduct your business and allow us to do legislation to represent our constituents in the state of Georgia. It's the same scenario with Coke. It's the same scenario with Major League Baseball. It's still out there. Whether it is still an issue when we go back into session next January, we'll find out. But the bill is still around.
Chris?
Joe, I would say we did pass it in the House. We did move the bill on to the Senate. Our local companies, even our large local companies, I would ask them to vet the bill out, read the bill. I believe you said they're 92 pages. I know it's over 90 pages. By getting to the 90th page, I quit looking at the numbers. Very important to read it and then take your interpretation of it. And then if you do take action such as what we've seen in statements, make sure that they're accurate by what is inside the bill. And I would especially ask companies and large companies in the state of Georgia to do that for us in any bill we pass, not just election integrity, any bill. Pay attention to those, then communicate, and then communicate with us on the impact that you think it's going to have.
All right, very good point. All right, House Bill 146, paid parental leave. And what this does, this bill offers 3 weeks of paid parental leave anytime to nearly 250,000 state public, university, and public school employees after the birth, adoption, or foster placement of a child. Chris, we'll talk about that. It did pass.
Maternity is so important to us in this state, and try to improve that for all citizens, and as those young ones are being raised up. And I fully support that more time for the parents to bond and be with that newborn and be a part of that. Again, this is another one, Joe. I think that if you look around at what some other states have done, that we were a little late getting off the dock. And it's time to do this for our new parents and these children that need it. Let's don't forget that this to me is a bill for a 2-year-old little girl, 4-year or 2-month-old, or 2-day-old little boy, and let's support them.
And does this bill follow, or at least these guidelines follow, some corporate guidelines as well that's being offered in the private sector?
Boy, that's a good question. I'm not certain on if it follows corporate or not.
Go ahead. I know this is a bill that passed under Trump's administration on the federal level, and what we did is we just applied it to the state level because, if you look at it from a standpoint of, these new parents need help. This isn't a paid vacation. If anybody's ever had a newborn in their house for the first 3, there's no vacation involved. And as a state that is trying to lead the nation as being a pro-life state, this is a pro-life measure as well. This is allowing, a mother who has a child to have that, 3 weeks off paid to support their child. And I think this was a good measure that, like Representative Irwin said, we were a little behind the ball, but we got it through, and I think it's something I'm certainly proud that we passed.
I was just going to say this basically followed the federal decisions that were made, but as far as how does it mirror private businesses and that sort of thing, there are businesses that offer this. There are some that offer more, some that offer less. That was a discussion that was held during some of the debate and the committee discussion on this bill, but it was more or less designed to mirror what the federal government was doing.
Well, we're about out of time here for today, but I did want to just allow the last question to be to each of you, kind of not an open-ended question, but take it how you want and where you want to go with it. Something that in this session you wish you had accomplished or had been accomplished by the General Assembly as a whole, or for you two that are doing the first time, something you experienced you didn't see coming, or what that might have been like. So we're going to start with Chris as the senior here on that, and then we'll go down the line. So Representative Irwin.
Well, number one, I came in the first day with the idea that let's do what our Constitution tells us. Let's get that budget set. And let's get that accomplished, because that helps to run our state, keeps this state moving forward in a planned system there. So we needed to do that. I kind of pulled that into this session from when we recessed in the last one, right after crossover in the last session, then came back this summer. All right, with that, my energy grew to do things as soon as I noticed we tackled that right away. Of course, remember, we went in very concerned because we had all these new safety regulations. We were separated, as Representative Anderson said, in 3 different areas. We were wearing masks. We were social distancing. I was worried about, in the communication could have been, are we going to end up having to pause this session again like we did the last one? And but we took the precautions. So with that, then all of a sudden you started seeing a surge of what I'll tell you is, hey, we can get to this. We can get this done. Let's have the communication. Let's get the data. And so I can't tell you that going in, we accomplished my goal right off the bat, and that was to set the budget, to hold the AAA bond rating, to be conservative with that budget in these COVID times. And then very quickly it grew to, boy, what can I do for economic impact for my community out here in my district? How can I lower that unemployment that we have in our district? And then the safety of our district by offering the vaccine in this area, which we're very proud of up here, Joe, by the way. And I want to commend our senator on a big push for that, for this area. Senator Hatchett had a lot to do with the fact that we are a test site for mass vaccination for those that want to come do it. Make it easy for this district and this session to do that, and that'll get us back on our feet even quicker. So those were some of the things that I'm checking off that I'll tell you that we did. So I was very pleased at the finish.
I'll stay in the House. Victor Anderson.
Okay. Again, first session, not really knowing, knew a little bit of what to expect, and it was even different from that. As far as some things that I was a little disappointed didn't make it through, we did have some very good bills. Senator Hatchett carried a bill on the Senate side that actually made it to the House on it's a Second Amendment bill that increases reciprocity for the state of Georgia concealed carry permits in other states, expands that, and some other good provisions. That one I was hoping would make it through. We had a bill that was introduced that was considered a Protect Girls Sports bill. You hear of a lot of it going on right now across the country. A lot of it's referred to as a transgender, basically saying that biological males are not allowed to compete, at least at the high school and under level, in the same sports and against biological females in certain sports. And that was a bill that never really got much traction, but had a lot of interest initially, at least. As far as some things that did happen for myself, my primary goal was to come in and to learn the process, to learn how to represent the people of District 10 the best way. And I accomplished a lot of that learning. Part of it was, and I had no intention to do this, but part of it was by carrying some bills. I carried 2 bills and a resolution this year. One of my bills actually passed through, and we're working with the governor right now on a signing for that bill, and it's a cybersecurity bill. It allows local city and county governments to meet and discuss cybersecurity plans, contracts, deficiencies, that sort of thing in closed session. That really wasn't allowed before, or if it was allowed, it was through an interpretation that could potentially be challenged. So we're actually codifying that and allowing that to happen. The city we're in, city of Cornelia, was hit with a cybersecurity attack last year that pretty much shut down their billing system for a couple of weeks. A lot of money spent, a lot of time, and a lot of inconvenience for our citizens. This, while it may not have prevented it by the letter of the law, it would have provided the mechanism for the city council and leadership to put plans in place that could potentially have decreased that. It's happened in communities around us. The other one that I got passed is a resolution calling for a study committee on annexation dispute resolution. We've had some issues not only locally here with that, but across the state. Some really egregious stretches, if you will, of annexation law, and come to find out, and basically in the law, there's very little provision for dispute resolution, and the provisions are very, very tightly parametered. So I considered that a big win this session, because I was told the whole time, we're not going to do study committees, but on sine die, the last day, I was allowed to present that resolution to rules. It came to the House floor for a unanimous vote. So we will have a House study committee on that will produce potential recommendations and legislation for next session.
And very good. And to wrap up, Bo Hatchett in the Senate.
Yeah, well, thank you for having us today. Obviously, it's a pleasure being here. And I guess the 2 things, number one, the thing I'm most disappointed that I wasn't able to accomplish was a bill that Representative Anderson was talking about earlier that I was able to get through the House. It was a Second Amendment and First Amendment bill. It prevented well, first off, it recognized concealed weapons permits in other states. We're going to honor those here in Georgia, and that would have also opened us a Georgia license holder to carry in 6 different states as well. Further, on the way the law is passed right now is during a state of emergency, a governor can't come and get firearms, but it says nothing about ammo and other weapons. And so this would have prevented our governor or a future governor during a state of emergency from confiscating weapons, confiscating ammo. Further, it would prevent a governor from shutting down a gun store, targeting a gun store and shutting those down, because I think that's a big Second Amendment issue, and I'm worried about the way our state may be headed, and it's kind of while our governor didn't do that, some in the future may, and this would protect that. Further, as far as the First Amendment goes, it would prevent a future governor from shutting down a church. We saw in this pandemic, it was an illness, but it also a lot of mental health issues came out of this. Suicide rates increased, and I think, you know, during a pandemic, one thing that most people can rely on is their religion, and I don't ever want that to be taken away from the people. You know, we have a First Amendment right, and that bill would have protected that as well. And, you know, we got it out of the Senate. It's still in the House, ready for a vote, and hopefully we can get it up next session. But one thing that I'm obviously proud of is being able to pass bills as a freshman. I was able to help, or we actually sponsored the bill that Representative Anderson was talking about earlier, but I was able to pass a taxpayer protection bill that basically leveled the playing field for businesses when they challenge a tax ruling. Right now, the Department of Revenue had a huge advantage because they got to decide how they want to interpret a certain statute. And what it does away with their ability to just ambiguously or I guess interpret a statute how they want to, and it just levels the playing field for businesses and taxpayers moving forward if they have those challenges. So, you know, it was a good session. I want to thank both of the representatives here for working tirelessly. There were a lot of things that we were able to accomplish, and I look forward now that Victor and I know the ropes a little bit better. We can hopefully get some good stuff going for our district next legislative session as well.
We hope Victor gets to his desk next time.
That's right.
To go into the House chamber. There you go. All right. Well, we want to say thanks to each of you. You asked for the job, you got the job, and you fulfilled your obligation, and we thank you. And I know it's not just 40 days a year. I know that it's basically 52-week-a-year job. So thank you very much, Representative Chris Irwin, Victor Anderson from the Senate side. That would be Bo Hatchett. We thank the Habersham Chamber of Commerce for facilitating this, along with Kinetic by Windstream for what they've done, and we thank you for viewing as well. So thank you for being here today. Until next time, thank you. Goodbye.